My name is Sophie. I worked with Shayne and Amanda, and we chose the topic of designer babies. So in part one, I'll be discussing the contemporary context of the controversial issue of designer babies. There are moral and ethical questions posed with this idea. However, it offers a way for parents to select desirable traits like athleticism and intelligence, as well as the ability to ensure a healthy child despite the genetics of the family. Although there are many positive medical possibilities, the ethical concerns seem to outweigh them. With recent advances in technology, people are now able to do so many things that they weren't able to do before. Among these is the concept of in vitro fertilization, IVF for short. In vitro fertilization is the surgical implantation of an embryo into a mother. In vitro fertilization allows people who were previously unable of conceiving a child to conceive a child regardless of sterility or medical conditions. So now almost everyone can have biological children. This process has also given way for people to screen for diseases. However, in vitro fertilization is still debated with whether it is ethical or not. Primarily, in vitro fertilization is questioned in the sense that babies that are produced through this process can be considered inhuman or not as human as babies born naturally. And the other question is, should we be scientifically altering the reproductive process? Transitioning from ethics of in vitro fertilization and into the ethics behind designer babies. Designer babies are babies that have their genes altered in order to produce desired traits like athleticism, intelligence, and it also has the ability to alter physical traits like eye color, hair color, etc. Designer babies have ethical questions regarding playing God, and people's fears stem from this idea of playing God and whether a baby designed through science and edited to be, in a sense, perfect is actually a person or if they are just human. Some refer to the idea that these babies could become real-life Frankensteins and that people won't accept them as human, and designer babies have the potential to completely change the society we live in and cause immense issues in regards to wealth and power. As mentioned in the Tufts Now article, there may be a change in the social hierarchy if people begin to completely design babies. In essence, people with the wealth to acquire and use this technology will produce perfect children, which will mean these genetically engineered children may be idealized and viewed as better than children who aren't. This is a huge issue because it will further divide society and create even more social gaps. Currently, many countries have a ban on doctors physically editing genes using CRISPR technology, primarily due to these ethical concerns. In essence, we have the technology available to start gene editing, but we are only able to, by law, perform procedures like IVF, which is just still hotly debated. However, despite these strict laws, a scientist in China claims to have produced the world's first designer babies. The scientist claimed to use gene editing to make the world's first designer babies and to make twin girls resistant to HIV, which has sparked uproar throughout the world. What was once thought to be an issue of the future could now very well be an issue of the present. This affects not only people in China, but people all over the world, because countries will have to decide the limitations put on designer babies and whether there should be any sooner rather than later. In summary, the ethics behind designer babies seem to outweigh the medical benefits associated with this technology. This is a heavily debated and controversial issue that will continue to resurface as more technology comes about, making it something people should keep fresh in their minds.
Hi, my name is Amanda, and I'll be covering the historical context of designer babies. My mom is mortified of snakes, and she hates the idea of them being pets. On a video call, she exclaimed, "They're wild animals." I found her comment interesting. All animals were wild at some point. We have been domesticating them for our purposes for an extremely long time. In fact, artificial selection of dogs started around 32,000 years ago. The controversy, it seems, has been around quick genetic fixes. The concept of designer babies was set in motion long before our time. Two events within the last century that have spiked interest in designer babies are infant screening and the first baby born as a product of in vitro fertilization. To begin, Interest in designer babies began with infant screening shedding light on the idea that diseases follow laws of genetics. In 1934, Robert Guthrie found phenylpyruvic acid in the urine of children with certain developmental delays. His discovery shook the U.S. into infant screening for PKU. He began sending tests to hospitals to look at blood and urine samples done on massive numbers of U.S. infants. Guthrie was interested by the fact that the parents of children with PKU are cognitively normal. He discovered a genetic factor to the disease and suggested the implementation of genetic counseling. As early as 1934, scientists were attempting to find genetic solutions to inheritable diseases. According to Lynn S. Wilcox in her article, Peas and Primroses, this event was when genetic diseases were first addressed publicly. Moreover, the first baby born as a product of in vitro fertilization opened the door to gene editing. Much of the interest in and progression of genetic modification stemmed from in vitro fertilization. Despite backlash in 1978, over 2 million babies have been born using IVF as of 2006. Louise Brown was the first baby born using IVF. Her birth was flooded with controversy. There was medical and religious debate. The Vatican responded with disapproval and fear of IVF being used as a weapon. This is where the argument of playing God arose. To this day, Louise Brown says she receives hate mail. Concerns when it comes to genetically modifying animals and bacteria tend to be very different when compared to humans. In 1973, Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen created the first genetically modified organism, a bacteria cell that was given antibiotic resistance. This development was debated for 3 days in the Asilomar Conference in 1975, where they brought to light many concerns, but allowed research to continue if guidelines were put in place. Additionally, mice were the first genetically modified animals done by Rudolf Janisch in 1974. The concerns related to genetic modification of animals have been for the safety of the environment, the cost of genetically modified animals mating with wild ones, the happiness of the animal. They differ from the concerns of PKU screening, in which the disease was seen as not common enough for mass testing, and Louise Brown's experience, where there was a fear of biological warfare and playing God. Overall, many things have led to where we stand with designer babies and the controversy surrounding it. It began with the domestication of and breeding of plants and animals for different traits. This led to an understanding of certain congenital diseases through infant screening. IVF became a major leap in conception. All in all, these controversies have been developing for long periods of time and will continue to. There are, in the end, many events that set the concept of designer babies into motion.
Hi, I'm Shayne and I'll be reframing the issue, taking into consideration both the contemporary state of genetic engineering as well as the history behind this technology that could allow for designer babies. We will now look at the future of this highly controversial scientific advancement. With potential benefits of pairing CRISPR technology and targeted gene expression, such as the ability to theoretically avoid heritable diseases and endless resources for embryos, come myriad of negatives. Negatives and potential societal controversy that many feel far outweigh the benefits of vanity and the potential to cure diseases, including but not limited to mutations, DNA mosaicism, forms of genetic trait cleansing, unauthorized use of genetic materials, and legalities of defining parenthood. Let's take a look at these hot topics in order to better understand what will move past mere sensationalism soon and become the center of scientific, potential, political, economic, and public discourse. With over 6,000 known genetic diseases, CRISPR technology claims to have the ability to avoid, cure, and eliminate diseases such as cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia, and therefore greatly avoid human suffering and unnecessarily early deaths. With this new technology, the ability to utilize human DNA found outside of sperm and eggs to create embryos and pick genetic traits is on the horizon. Due to the ability to theoretically use DNA from hair, blood, or saliva, for example, the face of IVF would completely evolve, as it would not depend on viable sperm and eggs, and therefore absolutely anyone could have biological children. While there have been great advances in technology made specifically to cut DNA apart and remove problem genes, delivery and implantation of new genes is much more complicated and is not yet perfected. Because of this, there is high potential for new undocumented DNA mutations, as well as uncontrollable reactions, such as duplication, that would lead to cancer or other issues. DNA mosaicism, or the conflict of genotypes, is also a largely dangerous potential complication. This leads to conditions that range from infertility of the child, webbed fingers and toes, to physical deformations such as those on the left, along with many other complications. As discussed throughout the presentation, there is potential for corruption and bias within the choosing of genes and traits of children that could lead to even further social classes and further reasons for wage and opportunity gaps. Along with the benefits of being able to use DNA for more than sperm and eggs comes a large potential for unauthorized use of genetic materials. Something as simple to collect, such as hair to create a child, and attribute specific traits could open even more routes within the black market and for celebrities and other desirable people's DNA. With the ability to pick and choose genes to insert into genomes and or to utilize various DNA materials comes the ability to use genetic material from more than 2 people, resulting in children with 3 or more parents. This has already been successfully completed in the UK and could raise complications regarding financial and social responsibility as well as custodial rights. From genetically engineered superbugs, highly lethal viruses that are resistant to environmental influence or any medical treatment, to the activation of genes to acquire diseases or to malfunction, research and development of militarized use of genetic engineering technology is already happening around the globe. So what do all these potentials mean? There is an intensifying need for public focus and discussion on this topic to balance sense of obligation to better mankind and to determine the trajectory of human history.